All right, so get this. We're going deep today on a case that has baffled people for like almost 100 years. The murder of Julia Wallace.
Wow.
It's got everything. Conflicting evidence, shady characters, theories that'll honestly make your head spin.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, we've got articles, books, even original police statements. It's going to be a wild ride.
So, what makes this case so special? What sets it apart from other murder mysteries?
That's the thing, right? It
Yeah.
kind of throws a wrench in, like everything we think we know about a classic murder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
It makes you question everything, like the evidence, the motive, even what justice really means. It's a big one.
I'm intrigued already.
Oh, you will be. So picture this. 1931 Liverpool. Our main guy is William Herbert Wallace. He's an insurance agent. But get this, he's also into chess, plays the violin, and even dabbles in chemistry.
Wait, really?
Yeah, not your typical suspect, right?
Not at all.
Now, he was married to Julia, and she had a few secrets of her own, like starting with her age. She was actually 17 years older than William, and she kept that hidden.
That's interesting. Makes you wonder how that played into their dynamic, especially back then.
For sure. But okay, so the real mystery kicks off one night at William's chess club. He gets a phone message, right? From this guy, R.M. Qualtrough. This Qualtrough guy wants to meet William at this address, says it's about an insurance thing. Sounds pretty normal so far.
Right.
Except, get this, the address doesn't exist.
Wait, what?
Yeah, William goes looking for this place, Menlove Gardens East. He asks neighbors, even a policeman. Nobody's ever heard of it.
So who was this Qualtrough guy? What was the point of this fake address?
It's like the beginning of a really messed up scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
And, well, we know how it ends, but the why and the how. That's the real puzzle.
Okay, yeah.
So William can't find this meeting spot. He decides to head home. And this is where things take a seriously dark turn. He finds his wife, Julia, murdered.
Oh, no.
Yeah, brutally murdered in their sitting room. When I was going through the reports, I mean, the brutality of it all really got to me.
I bet.
Someone really wanted to hurt her. You know, it wasn't just some random robbery gone wrong.
Yeah, it definitely points to something more personal, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So naturally, the police zero in on William. But going through those original investigation reports, their case, it really hinged on circumstantial evidence. It's shaky. There's this phone call, right? It was traced to a booth near their home. But the operator swore it wasn't William's voice.
Interesting.
And then there's the timeline. The police tried to piece together this timeline where William would have had just enough time to kill Julia A.D., get to the tram stop where he was seen later. But honestly, the more I looked into it, the more holes I found. It just doesn't add up.
Like what kind of holes? Give me an example.
Well, for one, there were no bloodstains on William. None.
Oh, wow.
You'd think with a crime that violent, there'd be some trace of blood, right?
You'd think so.
And back then, they didn't even have fancy forensic stuff like luminol. They could have missed a lot.
That's true. The technology was limited back then.
Right. And then there's the milkman. He said he saw Julia alive just a few minutes before William would have had to leave to catch his tram. Doesn't make sense.
So their timeline falls apart there.
Exactly. It's almost like they were so sure William did it that they tried to make the evidence fit their theory.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Like, remember that Macintosh they found under Julia's body?
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
The police said, oh, William used it to keep blood off himself. But honestly, that feels like a stretch.
It does make you wonder, what if we could examine that Macintosh with today's technology? DNA, fiber analysis.
We could be here all day going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the trial. The evidence was weak, the timeline was shaky, but William was found guilty.
Wow.
Imagine the public pressure back then. This respectable guy murdering his wife. It was a huge scandal.
I bet. It's important to remember the context, right? 1930s England. It was a different time. And there was a lot of pressure to find someone guilty.
Definitely. And that's what makes what happened next even crazier. William's conviction. It gets overturned by the Court of Criminal Appeal, a first in British legal history.
No way.
Yeah. They basically said the evidence wasn't enough to support a guilty verdict.
This case actually had a big impact on British law, you know. It showed how important it is to have solid evidence and that public opinion shouldn't sway legal decisions.
It's true, justice won, but it came at a cost. Because, yeah, William was legally free, but in the eyes of the public, he was far from it.
Right. Imagine the stigma, going back to work, everyone whispering about him being ostracized.
Exactly. He ended up moving away and died just 2 years later. But he always maintained his innocence.
So that leaves us with a huge question. If William didn't kill Julia, then who did?
That's what we'll get into next.
So this is where things get even more interesting. The focus kind of shifts away from William Wallace. Years later, this crime writer, Jonathan Goodman, he gets hooked on the case and really starts digging. And his investigation leads him to a new suspect, Richard Gordon Parry.
Parry? Yeah, wasn't he like a coworker of William's or something?
He was. They both worked at the Prudential, the insurance company. Parry even covered some of William's collection rounds when he was sick.
Ah, so he knew Julia and their house.
Exactly. But Goodman also found out that Parry, well, he had a bit of a shady side, let's say. He'd been skimming money from his collections.
Interesting. So do we know if William knew about Parry's little side hustle? And if he did, why not report him?
It's one of those questions that's bugged everyone looking at this case. We can only guess. Maybe William had his reasons, but it definitely makes things more complicated between them.
Yeah, no kidding. It paints Parry in a pretty suspicious light. He had motive, opportunity. But didn't we say earlier that Parry had an alibi?
We did. And that's where things get even trickier. Another investigator, a radio journalist, Roger Wilkes, picks up where Goodman left off. And he uncovers some pretty incriminating stuff, like a mechanic at a local garage. He told Wilkes that he saw Parry washing his car, like really intensely, the night of the murder.
Oh, wow.
And get this, one of Parry's gloves. Apparently it was covered in blood.
Hold on. So Parry's got a motive. He knows the Wallace's house. And now we've got a blood-stained glove. That's starting to sound pretty bad for Parry.
Yeah, it does. Unfortunately for the investigation, Parry had already died by the time Wilkes started digging around, so we couldn't get his side of the story. No explanation for the glove. It's another one of those loose ends that this case is full of.
So what happened next? Did anyone, try to challenge Parry's alibi after this new evidence came out?
Here's where we got to give props to author James Murphy. He dove deep into the case back in 2001. His book brought some crucial info to light. First, he confirmed Julia's real age. She had been lying about being younger, which makes her relationship with William even weirder, honestly.
Yeah, definitely adds another layer to it all.
But more importantly for the Parry theory, Murphy found the original police statements from way back in the 30s.
Ooh, what did those say? Anything about the glove? Or where Parry was that night?
They actually totally contradict what everyone was starting to think about Parry. Turns out he had a solid alibi. Witnesses put him at someone else's house during the murder.
So Parry's off the hook. But if it wasn't him, then who? Any other suspects pop up?
Get this. Even P.D. James, the famous crime writer,
Yeah.
She got in on the action. And her take on the case, it might surprise you.
Okay, I'm all ears. What did she think? New suspect? Whole new angle?
Well, she basically circled back to William Wallace.
You're kidding. After all this, she thought he was guilty.
It's pretty wild, right? Her theory is that the Qualtrough call, maybe it wasn't totally random. Maybe it was a prank by Parry, to get back at William for knowing about the money skimming. And James suggested that maybe when William realized it was a trick and found Julia dead, he just snapped. Killed her in a fit of rage.
A crime of passion. But wouldn't William have to be, super clever to clean up the scene and make it look like he didn't do it?
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with James's theory. She admitted it. William would have had to be ruthless and incredibly lucky to pull it off. But she suggested maybe he used his chemistry knowledge to get rid of evidence.
I can see where she's coming from, but I'm not totally convinced. Anything else about this Qualtrough call? Anything that could tell us if William was involved? It's like every time we think we're getting close to figuring this thing out, something else pops up and throws us off.
It is a lot to keep track of.
Like those Russian nesting dolls. Each one you open, there's another one inside.
Huh. Speaking of surprises, there's one more piece of this puzzle, and it brings us right back to Richard Gordon Parry.
Right.
In 2017, this woman, Anne Carlton, she wrote a book. Her dad actually visited William Wallace in prison.
Right, I read about that. What was so important about this prison visit? It happened ages ago.
Well, according to Carlton, during the visit, William told her dad who he thought killed Julia. She doesn't say the name in the book, but it sounds a lot like she's talking about Richard Gordon Parry.
Wow, so even after everything, even being wrongfully convicted, William still thought Parry was behind it all. That's a pretty serious accusation,
Yeah.
especially with Parry supposedly having an alibi.
It is. Carlton even suggests that maybe Parry's family, they were kind of powerful. Maybe they covered things up to protect him.
Cover it.
But then, just when you think we're back to focusing on Parry, another theory comes along that tries to tie it all together. This author, Anthony M. Brown, he wrote a book in 2018 with a whole new interpretation.
Okay, hold on. So Brown's theory Is he on Team William or Team Parry?
He kind of says they're both right, in a way. Brown's idea is that, yeah, Parry was involved, but he didn't act alone. He thinks Parry planned it, the whole burglary thing, but he hired someone else to actually do it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So Parry sets up the fake call, gets William out of the house. But this other guy, the accomplice, he's the one who runs into Julia and, I don't know, panics, kills her. And that's why Parry has an alibi. But there's still stuff linking him to the crime.
You got it. It's a pretty clever theory, actually. It brings together Parry's motive, the fake call, the bloody glove, and it explains why William's innocent A&D, why the crime was so brutal.
Man, this is a lot. Wrongful conviction, a shady coworker, a fake phone call, a possible cover-up, and now a mystery accomplice we don't even know. It's kind of mind-blowing.
This case really shows you that real-life investigations, they're not like in the movies or detective novels. It's messy. Conflicting stories, missing pieces, questions that might never get answered.
It makes you think, will we ever really know what happened to Julia Wallace? Or will it always be one of those mysteries that just stays with us?
I think that's why people are still so fascinated by it. It makes you think critically, look at the evidence, and accept that some mysteries might never be solved.
So for all the armchair detectives listening out there, what's the takeaway from all this?
I think it's a good reminder to be open to different ideas and don't just assume things. We might never know for sure who killed Julia Wallace or what happened that night, but by looking at the different theories, the evidence, and what life was like back then, it helps us think for ourselves and realize that real-life mysteries are complicated.
Well, I know I'll be thinking about this case for a while. It shows how one event can have such a lasting impact. All these questions and theories, and the search for answers that we might never find.
And you never know, maybe someday some new evidence will come out and finally solve this mystery. But until then, Julia Wallace's case remains an enigma, a puzzle we can't quite solve, a story that just keeps drawing us in.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep those detective minds working. You never know what mysteries are waiting to be discovered.